I've always believed that real love doesn't quit when things get tough. For over 2 decades, I stood by Marcelo through every storm. Job losses, sick parents, forgotten anniversaries. I was there, every time, not because I had to be, but because I wanted to. That's the kind of love I gave him. Quiet, steady, unconditional. But lately, something's shifted, and no one had to say a word for me to feel it. He started coming home later, not dramatically, just enough to make me feel like I was no longer the reason he hurried. The kisses faded into nods, the hugs turned into shoulder pats. The space between us grew in ways I couldn't measure, only feel. And yet, I kept believing maybe it was just a rough patch. Marriage has those, right? So one evening I decided to bring back something simple, something warm and familiar. I thought, maybe if I made the night cozy, he'd remember us. I grabbed my keys, already picturing the soft lights, his favorite snacks, a cold beer, maybe even a laugh or two. I wanted connection, not confrontation, just something to pull him back to me, if only for a night. So I headed for the car, thinking nothing of it, just a quick store run. But what I found in that car would take the floor right out from under me. I opened the car door, tossed my purse onto the passenger seat, and was about to slide in when I noticed something. A small flash of red leather, half tucked between the seat and the center console. Not mine. I reached down, thinking it was maybe a notebook or a receipt Marcelo had dropped. But when my fingers pulled it free, my heart skipped. It was a wallet. A woman's wallet. At first I froze, just stared at it in my hand. It felt like it didn't belong in this world, like it had slipped in from someone else's life and landed in mine. My mind scrambled to make sense of it. Maybe it belonged to a coworker. Maybe he'd given someone a ride. But deep down, my stomach was already twisting. There was no innocent version of this that made sense, not with the way he'd been lately. I opened it with fingers that suddenly didn't feel like mine. There was a driver's license, a few credit cards, even a little picture of a dog tucked in one pocket. And a name, Camila Duarte. The name didn't ring a bell. But then I saw the company badge, same logo as Marcelo's office. I didn't breathe, I didn't blink, because I knew this wasn't just someone's lost wallet, this was someone from his world, and she had made her way into mine. As I lifted the wallet to tuck it back, unsure of what to even do with it, a folded slip of paper fluttered out and landed on the floor mat. I stared at it. My hand reached for it before I even realized. A motel receipt, dated exactly 3 nights ago. The same night, Marcelo told me he was staying late at the office to finalize a report for the regional manager. The lie was printed in ink. Something inside me went quiet. Not shattered, just still. Like the moment after a glass falls, but before it hits the ground. My chest felt hollow, but my mind raced. I sat there, wallet in one hand, receipt in the other, while my heart negotiated between denial and truth. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just knew. Knew that something I had feared for weeks was finally standing in front of me. And it had a name, a date, and a room number. I put everything back exactly where I found it. Every detail, every corner. I needed time. I needed clarity. And more than anything, I needed the truth. Not his version, but the real one. So I started the car, drove to the store like nothing had happened, picked up the beer, the snacks, even smiled at the cashier, because I wasn't ready to explode. No, I was ready to observe. And quietly, I began to prepare for the story behind the wallet, to tell itself. Back home, I watched Marcelo eat the snacks I'd bought, laughing at a show, sipping his beer, completely unaware. I smiled, nodded, asked how his report turned out. He gave me the same rehearsed tone he'd used a dozen times before, and I saw it differently now. Not stress, not fatigue, guilt. He didn't even notice the way I studied him, the way I counted every blink, every pause before a lie. That night, when he finally dozed off in front of the TV, I went to the bedroom and pulled out the wallet. Under the soft yellow lamp, It felt even more intrusive, more real. Camila Duarte. She was young, pretty, just enough makeup to look polished, just enough softness in her eyes to seem harmless. But she wasn't harmless. Not in my story. She worked at his office. I recognized the company ID and suddenly pieces began to click. I remembered him mentioning her name once, offhandedly. Camilla handled the briefing, he'd said, while scrolling through his phone. I hadn't even blinked at the time. Why would I? But now I saw it for what it was, a breadcrumb, one he never thought I'd follow. And there it was. Confirmation that the woman in the wallet wasn't a stranger. She was part of his daily life, and for at least one night, a part of his after hours too. I sat there, wallet open on my lap, staring at the motel receipt like it might vanish if I blinked too hard. It was cheap, the kind of place tucked between a gas station and a forgotten diner. Room 207. Marcelo always said he hated those places. Too noisy. Bad for sleep, he'd claimed once on a road trip. Funny how comfort becomes negotiable when desire enters the equation. Or maybe shame just prefers a low rate and no questions. The timestamp chilled me. 8:47 p.m. I remembered that exact night. I'd been home alone, folding laundry, thinking I was being a good wife by not bothering him with texts. Don't wait up, he'd messaged. This report's brutal. And I believed him. I believed every word. That's what hurt the most. Not just the lie, but how easily I swallowed it. Like it was a vitamin I'd taken every day for years. Swallow, smile, sleep alone. But now, things were different. I wasn't the same woman who folded towels while he tangled sheets with someone else. I wasn't crying, not because I didn't want to, but because something inside me had switched off. A quiet resolve, like a lantern slowly lighting up in a cave. I didn't want revenge, not yet. I wanted understanding. I wanted to see how deep the lie went, and how long he thought he could live inside it. I put everything back exactly as I'd found it. Wallet slid beneath the seat, receipt folded inside like a secret too fragile to hold out in the open. He'd never know I saw it, not yet. That was the power I suddenly held, not just knowledge, but restraint. The kind that terrifies people like Marcelo if they ever realize they've underestimated you. I went to bed beside him that night, listened to his breath slow into sleep. My back turned, my eyes open. In the morning, I kissed his cheek like always, packed his lunch, tied his tie. He smiled, the same smile I used to trust. But I didn't see warmth anymore. I saw calculation. I saw a man who thought his secrets were safe because I'd never think to look. That was his first mistake, and maybe the one that would cost him everything. Because I wasn't just Lara, the wife anymore. I was Lara, the observer, the quiet one, the one who knew. And so I watched. I listened, and I waited. Because truth doesn't need a spotlight. It just needs patience. I wasn't going to ask him anything. Not yet. I was going to walk into his world, step by step, and see what else he thought he'd hidden. I had a name, a date, a receipt. What I needed now was the full picture, and I knew exactly where to begin. The next morning, I opened Marcelo's laptop while he was in the shower, not to snoop but to study. His tabs were still open, spreadsheets, emails, an online article about leadership techniques. And then, buried in the browser history, was a reservation page, the same motel, a week before the receipt. I felt my stomach tighten, but I didn't let it rise to my face. Just copied the address, closed the tab, and set the kettle to boil like nothing had happened. From there, I became invisible. Not to the world, to him. I still smiled, still asked about his day, still played the role he expected me to. But inside, I was rewiring. I checked his credit card statements while he slept. Matched charges to nights he claimed to be buried in work. Thursdays. Always Thursdays. The pattern was clearer than he ever imagined it could be, and once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. I started making calls, quiet ones. A friend who used to work in HR, a cousin who still did. Nothing invasive, just casual curiosity cloaked in polite conversation. "Do you know Camila Duarte?" I asked over coffee with a former colleague of Marcelo's. She did. "Sweet girl. Works closely with your husband, I think. Marketing team. They always seem to leave together on Thursdays, actually." That was the moment I knew. Knew I wasn't chasing shadows. I was standing in one. Every piece I found made the silence between us louder. I didn't scream, didn't accuse, didn't even cry. That wasn't the version of me he needed to fear. No, the danger was in my calm. In the way I smiled while noting the time of his last-minute meeting. In the way I asked if he needed dinner late Thursday night, knowing exactly where he'd be. I watched him lie to my face with the confidence of a man who'd been doing it for a long, long time. One afternoon, I stopped by his office building, not to see him, but to see her. Camilla. She walked out with a group laughing at something someone said, tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear. She looked young, ambitious, harmless maybe, but not to me. I didn't feel rage, I felt clarity. She wasn't the beginning of his betrayal, just the most recent chapter. And I wasn't going to give her my pain. I needed answers, not theatrics. The next move had to be precise, so I did something Marcelo never expected. I made a phone call. To someone with authority. "Hi, Mr. Araujo? I know we haven't spoken before. I'm Lara, Marcelo's wife." There was a pause on the line. "There's something I believe you should know, not just about your employee, but about the choices he's making that could reflect poorly on your company." His voice shifted instantly. Curious. Alert. And just like that, the game began to change. Mr. Araujo agreed to meet. He didn't ask too many questions, not over the phone. But his tone said enough. Professional concern, veiled in curiosity. I could hear the calculation beginning. Marcelo had always painted himself as indispensable. But men like that forget. Companies value reputation more than charisma. And when the cracks start to show, even the brightest employee can lose their shine. I wasn't just bringing him personal shame. I was holding a mirror to his professional mask. I didn't tell Marcelo about the meeting. I packed his lunch the next morning, just like always. Buttoned his collar, kissed his cheek, let him walk out the door without a clue that his wife was about to sit down with the man who signs his checks. That's the thing about betrayal. It teaches you the power of silence. The longer I held mine, the more dangerous I became. Not loud, not violent, just a woman who knows. And as I watched him drive off, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel broken. I felt composed, like I was finally sitting in the right seat of my own story, no longer begging to be seen, no longer wondering if I was enough. Now it was his turn to feel the ground shift. And as I slipped the wallet back into my bag and checked the time for the meeting, I knew everything was about to change. I dressed with care that morning, not flashy, elegant, understated. A navy blouse, simple earrings, and the heels Marcelo always said made me look too formal for errands. That made me smile. Today wasn't an errand. It was a statement. I wasn't walking into that office as someone's wife. I was walking in as a woman who knew exactly what had been done to her, and who had chosen grace over chaos. The receptionist greeted me with the same kindness she likely gave to vendors and clients. She didn't know who I was, not yet. But she would. "Mr. Araujo is expecting you," she said, motioning toward a frosted glass door. I thanked her and walked slowly, letting my heels announce every step. When the door opened, the air inside shifted. He stood to greet me, polite but unsure. I could see the questions flicker in his eyes. Good. Let him wonder. We sat across from each other at the long table. He leaned in, curious but cautious. "So, what is this about exactly, Mrs. Andrade?" I smiled gently, reached into my bag and laid it all out. The wallet, the motel receipt, printed screenshots, and a handwritten note with dates, names, and Marcelo's fabricated overtime stories. I didn't cry. I didn't tremble. I simply told the truth. And watched a man in power realize another man under him had lied through his teeth. Mr. Araujo didn't speak at first. He just looked at the documents, then at me, then back at the wallet. His jaw clenched slightly, not in anger but in embarrassment. Marcelo had made a fool of him too. "You're telling me this was happening on company time?" he asked slowly. I nodded. "On your clock, on your property, with someone under his supervision." That last part landed like a stone. His posture changed. Suddenly, this wasn't about infidelity. It was about liability. I could feel the power shifting in the room, not in a triumphant way, but in a grounded, dignified one. I wasn't there to destroy Marcelo's career. He was doing that all by himself. I was there to show the truth, to hold it in the light, and to make sure no more lies hid in company folders or late-night emails. Mr. Araujo leaned back, rubbing his temples. "We've been considering him for a promotion," he muttered. "Regional oversight." I let that sit. I didn't gloat. I didn't flinch. I simply looked him in the eye and said, "Then you should know the kind of man you're elevating." He blinked, and in that moment I knew the decision had already been made. Whether Marcelo would hear it today or next week, his future here had changed. I stood slowly, thanked him for his time, and gathered my things. And as I opened the door to leave, fate offered me one final, perfect detail. Marcelo was walking down the hallway, laughing with someone, folders in his hand, completely unaware. And then he saw me. Right there, in the meeting room, with his boss. His entire face changed, the color drained, his laugh died mid-breath. His steps slowed, but mine didn't. I walked past him, shoulders back, eyes forward. But just before I crossed the doorway, I turned to Mr. Araujo and said clearly, "I thought you should know the kind of man who represents your company after hours." Marcelo's lips parted like he wanted to speak, but nothing came out. No excuses, no explanations, just stunned silence. I didn't look at him. Not really. Just enough to let him know this wasn't a guess. It was a knowing. I didn't need to yell. I didn't need drama. My presence said everything. And the more he shrank in that hallway, the taller I felt. He'd built his lies in secret. I chose to unravel them in daylight. As I stepped into the elevator, the doors closed slowly, reflecting his stunned expression back at him. I could still feel his eyes on me, like he was finally seeing the woman he'd stopped looking at long ago. But it was too late. I wasn't his anymore. I wasn't anyone's shadow. I was Lara, calm, certain, and walking away with the one thing he thought I'd never find: my power. The calls started that same night. First a message. Short. Frantic. Then 3 missed calls. Then a voice note, slurred slightly, like he'd been drinking. "Lara, please, we need to talk." I didn't respond. I didn't even open them. There was nothing left to clarify. His truth had already spoken, louder than any apology could, and I had already decided. No fights, no begging. Just the exit he never saw coming. Quiet, clean, final. In the days that followed, the fallout unfolded just as I expected. Camilla transferred departments. Marcelo's promotion vanished like smoke. And while he still had a job, the whispers followed him down every corridor. He showed up at my door once, flowers in hand, eyes glassy with regret. I didn't answer, just watched from the window as he stood there, shrinking by the minute. That man who once controlled every room, now couldn't even get through my front gate. The divorce papers were ready by the end of the week. I sent them through a lawyer. No note, no explanation, just paperwork. He tried to call again. I let it ring. What was there to say? I gave him love, loyalty, a home. He gave me lies wrapped in motel sheets. I wasn't going to fight him for furniture or closure. I'd already won where it mattered. I walked away with my self-worth intact, and that was more than he ever expected. People around me started asking questions. Neighbors, friends, even my sister, who always suspected something was off. "What happened?" they'd ask, leaning in, hungry for drama. But I didn't give them any. Just a soft smile and a quiet answer. I outgrew something that stopped growing with me. That was enough. The truth didn't need to be shouted, and I didn't owe anyone the dirty details. Let Marcelo explain his downfall if he ever found the courage. At night, the silence in the house felt different. Not empty, peaceful. I lit candles, I played soft jazz while folding laundry, and I slept on my side of the bed without wondering who was on the other side. There was pain, yes, moments where a scent or a song pulled at the old memories, but even those began to fade, not erased, just released. I wasn't running from the past. I was walking towards something that felt like freedom. One afternoon, I passed the motel. I didn't stop, just glanced at it as the light turned green. It looked smaller than I remembered, less powerful. That's what truth does. It shrinks the things that used to haunt us. I didn't need closure. I didn't need revenge. I needed air, space, peace. And I had all three now. Marcelo had lost me in pieces, Thursday by Thursday, and I'd gathered what was left into someone stronger. I found a little cafe near the park, quiet, sunlit, with old jazz playing through dusty speakers. The kind of place Marcelo would have hated, too slow, too sentimental. But I loved it. I started coming every week, just me and a book, sometimes a journal. The staff learned my name. I became part of the rhythm, the soft clink of spoons, the low hum of conversation, the comfort of solitude that didn't feel lonely anymore. One morning, as I sipped my coffee and turned a page, I caught my reflection in the window. I looked calm, not triumphant, not broken, just me. The woman who once tiptoed around his moods now walked with purpose. The woman who begged for attention now knew how to pour it back into herself. My marriage had ended in a whisper. But my life? It was blooming in silence, in softness, in choice. He still texts sometimes, not often, just enough to remind me that he remembers what he lost. I never reply. What would I say? That I'm okay? That I'm better? That I forgave him not because he asked, but because I didn't want to carry his mistake forever? No. I say nothing. I just sip my coffee, close my book, and smile. Because in the end, I gave him love. He gave me lies. So I gave him consequences.